potentially detain anyone in the country.
August 22nd or August 29th. Will you be able to do August 16th?
Yeah. If I go to Italy, I'm going to miss the first week of their session. I was like, how bad would that be? It's going to be quite funny, but I get over it. Last year, the first week after the same
Wait, this was
right. And so I know that on specifically Grass negotiating with like a third party organization, obviously tax representing fire duty and the Justice Department to get these settlements. And I was like, they were like, this is not so I talked to people about it was sort of really grass people like talking about doing this in public forever and I talked to the president of that organization and he was all so I was like, who was on there? And I was like, no, I'm just saying this is proper veracity as doing this saying like that was publicly for since last summer. But one and then I just like talked to some of the other people that were asking me saying that about these NDAs. So I filed this over to Republicans and our social media person just goes, Democrats said this was improper, so they properly did this. And so, like, one of the founder of that organization, like, quoted me was like, this is for Germans. That's it. First, I'm like, well, it is. Two, it's not a good story. That's not what it says. And then I had the other guy texting me about all this content. Well, actually, in reverse order, this guy, I got all the stuff that I sent you about these cases. And I was like, all right, like, it wasn't really so much story, so I was like, I'm gonna add this stuff. So I did. I went back to change it, and then like the rest of the people were sending these other, like, we wouldn't even watch the videos, they were sending me other responses to this organization, which was like, anyway, I like good for people that have stuff like that, and then like 30 minutes after I did that, the other found this organization went on there, and was like, this is not. I was like, okay, so you want me to play this with data, right? No, it's not happening. They weren't. We got that. So bad.
I know, thank gosh. You know? I preferred a little warmer though.
Hey Steve, I gotta go on this side because of this great the wheels.
Wheels on the bus, babe.
Well, No, you're going before me. You go right there. You don't need to walk around.
You good?
It's really.
Well, good morning, everybody. This week is National Police Week, and the House Republicans are making something very, very clear. We back the blue. Not just with words, but with actions. Because while too many Democrats demonize police officers, excuse violent criminals, and side with chaos, Republicans are standing with the men and women who put the badge on and walk towards danger every single day. And this week, we're bringing bills to the floor to support law enforcement and actually help keep your communities safe. Let's remember what this week is really about. It's about people. It's about families. And it's about heroes like Deputy Sheriff Brad Reckling from my district, my hometown. Deputy Reckling from my hometown in Michigan, Romeo, Michigan, was a 9-year veteran of Oakland County. In 2024, Officer Reckling was ambushed and murdered in the line of duty, leaving behind a wife and 3 young children with 1 more on the way. Deputy Reckling stood between violent criminals and innocent people to do what he loved and make sure that your communities were safer. And he is exactly why we need to continue to back the blue. Earlier this week, I also saw firsthand sacrifices that our police officers and their families make every single day. I had the opportunity to do a ride-along with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, and I spent time with Deputy Milkey, who has served in law enforcement for more than 20 years. He finally reached a point in his career after 20 years that he could go on days and actually participate and coach in his children's sporting events and be present for his family every single day. We talked about House Republicans' push for no tax on overtime in the working families tax cut. And he told me directly what a difference that has made for not just him, but the other law enforcement agents that he works with and the morale in his department. Because of these officers, they're able to be more supportive and they're able to bring more money home to their families when they put their life on the line every single day. And when they put in extra hours to protect communities, they deserve to keep more of that money. At least that's what Republicans say and think. Because as I say every single week, every single Democrat voted to raise your taxes. Every single Democrat believes that the government is a better steward of your money than Officer Milkey. But here's what stuck with me most from speaking with Officer Milkey. His wife still worries every single day when he puts on that uniform and goes to work. Think about it. After 20 years of service, the fear and uncertainty never fully goes away. And yet, instead of gratitude, too many on the left continue vilifying the very people who stand between us and chaos. These are the men and women who put on the badge and want to keep your community safe, and the left is vilifying them. Our law enforcement officers step into dangerous situations so innocent people don't have to. And they do it knowingly that they may not make it home that evening. We owe it to Deputy Reckling's widow. We owe it to every single police officer's family wondering if their loved one will make it home safely at the end of their shift. And frankly, we owe it to the American people. Because when communities are safer, businesses thrive. Businesses don't leave. Neighborhoods don't collapse, and neighborhoods thrive when communities are safer. Here's the truth. Public safety matters. Law enforcement matters. Law and order matters. And it's the brave men and women who make law enforcement possible. So this week, House Republicans are proud to honor our law enforcement agents. And we're proud to say we support the men and women in law enforcement, and we back you. With that, I'm honored to turn it over to a man who's worn the badge before, and that is Mike Ezell. Let me get my box out of there.
Thank you, Lisa, and Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Leader, and Tom for having me today. You know, I wore the badge for over 40 years. I was a sheriff. I was a chief of police. I was a patrolman. I was a man that followed in my dad's own footsteps, and I thank God for the opportunity that I had to live a life of honor as serving the citizens of my county, Jackson County, Mississippi. What I like to remind everybody is that law enforcement officers are the ones that are out there at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a storm or a hurricane or whatever, answering the call, while everyone else is at home, nice, safely tucked in their beds. We're the ones that go running into the fire to help the firemen. We're the ones that go running into the homicide shootout where there are very dangerous people there at all times. It's been an honor to serve. I have served in every capacity, being assigned to the FBI Safe Streets Task Force for many years, dismantling drug cartels, which this Trump administration is fighting on a daily basis, along with the Republican members of Congress. I thank God for the opportunity now to support my fellow brother law enforcement officers as a member of Congress. And I like to say this, help is on the way, guys, and we are here to serve you this year for the rest of our time in Congress. As long as we have the badge, we're going to continue to do what's best for you and your families. I want everybody to remember that this is Police Week. Everybody needs the police. Everybody calls the police at various times. And I'm very thankful to have served my entire life as a law enforcement officer, and I'm very grateful to be here today. And thank you very much.
I gotta sneak by it. I should have a beeper going on. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for your service, too. From sheriff's deputies in Wright County, Minnesota, to Capitol Police officers right here in Washington, D.C., this National Police Week, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to the men and women who keep our communities safe. House Republicans will always back the blue, and Lisa's right. Meanwhile, Democrats continue their efforts to defund the police and return to the soft-on-crime, anti-law enforcement chaos of the Biden administration. In blue states and blue cities across this country, the danger of Democrats' pro-criminal policies has been put on full display. Just last week in New York, an innocent 76-year-old retired teacher was pushed down the subway stairs and killed by a criminal who had already been arrested 4 times this year alone. And how could anyone forget the innocent young woman who was violently stabbed in the throat on a train in North Carolina by a man with 14 prior arrests? Releasing violent criminals back into our communities jeopardizes public safety, demoralizes police officers, and makes the job of law enforcement even more dangerous than it already is. But it's not just Democrat policies that risk the safety of our men and women in blue. It's their anti-police rhetoric. Look no further than my state's sorry excuse for a governor, Tim Walz, who he actually called federal law enforcement the modern-day Gestapo. Only months after Walz's statement, one of these officers was dragged by a car and severely injured. Crime, chaos, and catastrophe are the reliable results of Democrat leadership. In contrast to this, Republicans are building on our work to support law enforcement and restore safety to our American streets. Under President Trump's law and order agenda, the murder rate has actually dropped to its lowest rate in 125 years. Thanks to no tax on overtime that Lisa was referring to in the working families tax cuts, officers have more money to support their families. And this week, we're going to vote on more common sense legislation to empower law enforcement and defend the police, not defund them. To all the men and women who wear the uniform every day, who work long hours away from your families, who put your lives on the line for our safety, I think all of us say thank you. 1 week will never be enough to honor your bravery, sacrifice, and your service. And with that, I turn it over to our great leader, Steve Scalise.
Watch.
Did I?
No, you're good. Thank you, Whip. You know, every week we pay tribute to our men and women in uniform, our law enforcement officers who keep our community safe. But this week is a special week where we all come together as Police Week to pay tribute to especially those law enforcement officers who paid the ultimate price, over 100 last year, that were killed in the line of duty protecting our communities. And Sheriff Ezel said it so eloquently. And last night we had a wonderful tribute on the Capitol steps that the Speaker led, where we had not only a large number of members of Congress, but we had some family members, families whose loved ones were lost as law enforcement officers. And it was tear-jerking to hear those stories. A young girl who lost her father, and he'll never be there for her again. And she recalled the memories she had of her father. And then, of course, that morning when she heard her mom answering that phone call to find out that her husband had been killed in the line of duty, killed by a repeat offender, as the Whip talked about, happens way too often because the criminal justice system fails all of us in so many ways, but it puts our law enforcement officers at risk too, which is why we need to make sure we get the policy right. I think a lot of you were in the room just a few weeks ago at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And we hear about it a lot. I've seen it personally. I would not be alive today if not for the bravery of law enforcement officers. But think about it, for everybody who was in the room at the Washington Hilton. We all heard the chaos and nobody really knew what was going on. You knew there was a shooter. You heard the calls. You didn't know if he got in, but he didn't get into the room. And why did he not get into the room? He got through armed, and his intention was to come in and kill the president of the United States and, frankly, kill everybody else he could that was in that room, but he never got there because law enforcement went to the danger. You saw them doing it. Right in real time, they ran to the danger when everybody else was running for cover to protect themselves. It was the law enforcement officers that risked their lives. The Secret Service agent that jumped in front of his gun and took the shot. Luckily, he had a bulletproof vest. And he's alive today and recovering. But he was willing to risk his own life so that we could all be safe. And that happens every day. It takes a special kind of person to answer that call. And thank God they do. And so that's why we celebrate them every day, but especially this week. We really pause to remember those who gave their life protecting our communities. We're bringing a number of bills to the floor this week in remembrance of Law Enforcement Week to try to help give more tools to our police officers across the country. We're also bringing a really important resolution by Zach Nunn to pay tribute to law enforcement, thank them for what they do, and also to stand up against these crazy ideas like defund the police. It's still going on today. You know, you saw a major shutdown finally ended 2 weeks ago. The Department of Homeland Security all over the idea that Democrats still want to defund police. You know, whether it's federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, state law enforcement. The titles of the law enforcement officers can change, but the Democrat mantra is the same. They want to defund them at every level, and we will not let it happen. We won't. We're going to always back the blue. It's a shame everybody does it, but we will. And you're going to see that continue to play out this week on the House floor in actual votes, and we'll be watching those votes closely. Really, really appreciate what our men and women in law enforcement do every day to keep our communities safe. God bless them. God bless their families. Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Leader and Whip, Conference Chair, and Sheriff Ezel, and thank you for sharing your long record of law enforcement, family legacy for you. That's a great sacrifice and service to the country. Let me start with just a little sad news we received last few days. We lost a former colleague, Bill Posey, Congressman Posey of Florida. And I just want to say a quick word that he was a genuinely good man and a faithful friend, and we were better for having served with him. And our prayers go out to his family, his wife Katie, who was his high school sweetheart, and their children and grandchildren. And it was a great loss. He retired last cycle because he wanted to go home and spend more time with his family. And now, in hindsight, I'm really glad he got the opportunity to do that. So we'll miss him. It's been mentioned, and we're talking a lot about National Police Week. And we do it every year, and you can't do it enough because this is something we owe to those who walk that thin blue line, as was discussed this morning. And here on Capitol Hill and in communities around the country, Americans are honoring the courage and the dedication and the sacrifice of law enforcement officers, and they well deserve that. Sadly, we'll mourn the men and women who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of our neighbors. And we owe our law enforcement officers everything because they sacrifice everything to stand guard against evil and protect all these communities around our great country. When law enforcement officers put on their uniform and they lace up their boots every morning, they just don't have a guarantee that they're going to return after that last shift. It's very real. The risk is real. And we've heard some of their stories this morning. We heard many last night. It's a story that too many American families know, and their stories come with a reminder of the danger these men and women face every single day. My own life, I know it, the sacrifice as well. I came from a first responder family, and my dad was severely disabled in the line of duty back in 1984, burned 80% of his body as a firefighter, and lived for 32 years with a severe disability from that event. And so it's the whole family that sacrifices when a man or a woman puts on a badge, puts on that helmet and goes into service. So we don't take it lightly. This year we're going to add 111 names to the National Law Enforcement Memorial, ensuring that their sacrifices are never forgotten. And we were there this morning, Sheriff and I, and some other former law enforcement members who are now serving in Congress. We laid wreaths there. We had a little ceremony, as we do every year. And I was reminded of the staggering statistics, and this is not well known, but the folks who maintain and keep the law enforcement memorial there, when they built that memorial, I know you've all seen it, I'm sure, it has all the names on it. It was erected in 1991, and they thought they would have enough space on all of the stones to last 100 years. I'm very sad to tell you that they've had to add new stones now to a second level of the memorial because we exceeded the space for the names in just that number of years. So there's over 24,700 officers who memorialized there. And as I mentioned, we had 111 for this year alone. And it's just something that we have to keep in mind all the time. You know, one law enforcement death is too many. That we've received welcome news this year, okay? And this is one bright spot. The amount of law enforcement deaths in the line of duty dropped 25% from 2024 to 2025. And that's the lowest number of law enforcement line of duty deaths since 1943. So we're very thankful for that. And it matters who's in charge. I mean, elections have consequences, and if you have elected officials, legislatures, a Congress that supports those in law enforcement, then it assists with these statistics. That's an objective fact, and it's a direct correlation to public policy. Republicans are going to continue to pursue legislation that makes officers safer. And we'll also continue to advance transformational policies like no tax on overtime, as you heard, which tens of thousands of law enforcement officers and their families have already benefited from, and they're telling us about it when we go home. And we're delighted to have delivered for them. That's what Republican policies do. Now, let me talk about a couple of quick issues here, and I'll take a few questions. The DHS funding issue has been a big deal around here, as you know. Before Republicans returned to work in our districts last week, we ended the majority of the shameful, record-long Democrat Department of Homeland Security shutdown. And I'm happy to report that we are right on schedule to finish the process and get our reconciliation bill to the President's desk by the June 1 deadline. We will fully fund both border security and immigration enforcement for the balance of President Trump's term. And we're going to do this for two reasons. Number one, obviously maintaining border security and deporting dangerous criminal illegal aliens is the baseline that the American people demand and deserve. They told us that in the last election cycle, and they say it all the time, every day since. We do not have a country if we do not have borders. That's just the bottom line. I'm grateful every day that America once again has a president who understands that. The second reason is it's very sad and shocking fact, and it's almost unbelievable to say this, but there's not a single Democrat in Congress, House or Senate, who believes that border security and immigration enforcement should exist. They do not believe that we should fund those at the federal level. It's a stunning statement, but it is true, and it's proven time and time again by their word and by their votes. They prove to you what they're about. I think everybody needs to keep that in mind. Look at the California's governor's race right now. I mean, what a spectacle. Nearly all the Democrats, including a former House Democrat and a Biden cabinet secretary, proudly said yes when they were asked the simple question if they support providing health care to illegal aliens. We're supposed to believe this is a serious political party right now? I mean, Democrats are chomping at the bit to regain power and reopen our borders and allow violent illegal aliens to continue to roam our streets. These are facts. This is not political talking points. This is what they are and what they're about. And we're not going to let them do that. So we're eager to quickly finish this reconciliation process and get this bill to the president's desk. Now, of course, we have to mention the redistricting news. That's the big headline, of course, over the last couple weeks, and there's some seismic developments. Let's put it that way. In the Calais case at the U.S. Supreme Court, the court restored a simple but profound truth. Yes, the Constitution protects every American equally, and that's a very important concept for us to maintain. This is another fact. Democrats spent decades trying to engineer electoral maps that divided Americans, and this decision from the Supreme Court hopefully ends that terrible practice once and for all. We find it amusing that Democrats are suddenly concerned about fair congressional representation, they say, and I challenge those Democrats to raise those concerns with the Republican congressmen from Massachusetts, Connecticut, or Rhode Island. They'll have a hard time doing that, of course, because Democrats have gerrymandered Republicans completely out of those states. And in Virginia last week, the Virginia Supreme Court, of course, affirmed what Republicans believed from the very beginning. We fought hard to win that ballot initiative, and we invested there. But ultimately, we knew that it was a hastily drawn gerrymander that was unconstitutional. It was a power grab. And thankfully, the courts, restoring and upholding the rule of law, did the right thing there. Democrats, by the way, put all their chips in the middle on that one. You saw it. And they burned through countless goodwill with the people of the state of Virginia and elsewhere, Democrats nationwide. They spent more than $65 million, and they even had Barack Obama cutting ads and robocalls, and it wasn't enough because it was such a crazy overreach. And it was all in pursuit of an unconstitutional scheme to dilute the power of Republicans of Virginia, and fortunately the plan failed spectacularly. They got a lot to answer for. Their press conference this week ought to be interesting. Look, this decision doesn't change our posture for 1 minute. Republicans are laser focused. We don't look to the right or the left. We charge straight forward. Election day is less than 6 months out, and we're going to continue advancing policies that make America safer and more prosperous while highlighting the stark contrast between our two parties. And you heard it here this morning. This election is about one simple thing. It's a contrast between common sense, represented by the Republican Party, and crazy. And Democrats have given us yet another great example this last week that when they suggested disbanding the entire Supreme Court in Virginia and making the highest age where you can serve on the bench of the state Supreme Court 54. I mean, it's a joke. Instead of just taking their medicine and acknowledging defeat, they've actually become arsonists. I mean, institutional arsonists. And remember, this is the party that breathlessly tells you that they are for small d democracy. It is the opposite of that. Republicans are for common sense. Democrats are for crazy. And it's as simple as that, and we're going to continue reminding the American people of this every single day. So with that, I'll take a couple questions. Yes, ma'am.
Yesterday, the president was asked about whether Americans' financial concerns were motivating him to make a deal with Iran. His response was, I don't think about Americans' financial situations. Do you think that's the right message? Do you think the president should be considering the financial toll?
I don't know the context in which he made that comment, but I can tell you the president thinks about Americans' financial situations. I talk to him on average twice a day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and we talk about it constantly. He's laser focused on trying to resolve the conflict in Iran, because if we get the Strait of Hormuz, when we get the Strait of Hormuz reopened, that will alleviate a lot of pressure with gas prices and other things in the economy. Now, we've done everything, the Republican Party, under President Trump's leadership, have done everything that we possibly can to reverse the maddening inflation of the Biden years that was at 40-year highs, and all the gross misspending over the last several years to get the economy back humming again. And we've done that in the big beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, infused with pro-growth policies. We put in incentives for job creators and entrepreneurs and risk takers, small business owners, to expand and add more jobs, to increase wages. Those things are beginning to happen. We put into place the lowest taxes, the biggest tax cut in American history to help out hardworking American families. The average American household has over $10,000 more in their pocket because of the policies that we passed. We put into the bill legislation to allow for American energy dominance again, to continue with our permitting reforms, to get all these things going and humming again. And the conflict with Iran has put a little damper on that. Now, as soon as that's resolved, I agree with the Treasury Secretary, I agree with the President, you're going to have an alleviation of the pain at the pump, and you're going to have prices come down overall. And we're very much looking forward to that. As you know, other economic indicators are going very, very well. The jobs numbers, unemployment numbers, the stock market, all these other factors. So as soon as we get gas prices back under control, we alleviate that pain. And I can tell you the President is laser focused on it. He spends a large part of every day working to resolve this. Right now he's in China. The President has laid down a marker that was overdue and very important. The American people are not going to be taken advantage of anymore by adversaries or allies. And he's demonstrated that resolve and that principle day after day, and he's negotiated much better trade agreements and much more fair policies for us. When he says America first, he doesn't mean America alone, obviously. He means that we put the interest of America first. And I'm going to tell you that's not a selfish proposition. When we do that, it's good for our citizens, it's good for this country, and every freedom-loving person around the world. So our prayers are with him, and he has a good visit with Xi in China. They come forward with some favorable policies and things that will help us out, and I believe he will, and we'll see how that develops. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also, speaking of the economic front, gas prices are up, inflation's up, Americans having some financial hardships across the country. That being said, is right now the right time for Congress to be prioritizing $1 billion for security apparatus at the White House, including $220 million for the East Wing ballroom, given the fact that President Trump had said it would be paid for by private donation?
Yeah, look, I think that's a gross misstatement of what's going on here. In the bill, and by the way, it's in a draft form right now, as you know, the second reconciliation bill. Sadly, we have to fund immigration enforcement and border on our own as a Republican Party, because remember, Democrats want to give $0 to it. The Secret Service put in an urgent request for additional security measures. It's not for the ballroom, it's for security measures. Now, we don't know what the final bill is going to be that we get. They got to go through 3 more steps. They're going through the bird bath, the parliamentarian review of the bill. They've got to go through 2 markups in committees and then ultimately action on the House floor. So we're not going to prejudge that product. We're waiting for it to come from the Senate. But I will say this, that in one section of the bill, it addresses security measures. It's very specifically defined on what those security requests are from the Secret Service. And I will say this, for many of you that were in the ballroom just a few weeks ago and sat through and observed the 3rd failed assassination attempt of a president just in a short number of years here, there's an urgent need for increased security measures. I mean, that is an objective fact, and it should be something that's bipartisan. The ballroom is totally privately funded. The president has dedicated like $400 million for that project, and by the way, it's going to be a donation to the country. You're aware the ballroom will be there long after he leaves, and he'll only get a few months of its use. So he's doing it for the country, but it's what's beneath the ballroom that is, in my view, far more important. And we've needed some of these security measures for a long time, and that's what this is all about. So there's a false narrative out there about it. I'm not going to prejudge the product we get from the Senate, but I certainly understand what the Secret Service's requests are. They have an almost impossible job right now, and they need that extra funding. Yes, sir.
Just to build off that question, I mean, the Trump administration has repeatedly argued in court that the ballroom itself is part of the security apparatus. So should the final bill explicitly rule out funding for the ballroom itself? I mean, do you think that would smooth over some of what you say is this false narrative that's developing?
Look, again, I don't have the pen in the Senate. They're writing the bill. We'll see what we get. But I think the president has been abundantly clear. He is excited about building a ballroom with private funding, not taxpayer funding. But the Secret Service says that as we enhance the White House grounds and the modernization there, that obviously we have to think differently about security. We live in a very dangerous time, and there are new and increasing threats that we have never faced before. And so Congress has a role in funding that, and we'll have to see how it all works out. Yes, sir.
Speaker Johnson, do you think that the Justice Department ought to
settle the president's $10 billion lawsuit over the leak of his tax returns. Is that appropriate? Is there a conflict of interest there?
One of the things that is not in my purview is the Department of Justice, okay, and how they evaluate cases and resolution of all that. So I don't know. I haven't thought about that or read into it. I got enough to say grace over every day, okay? So go ask the executive branch about it, all right? Thank you all so much, and let's celebrate Police Week.
On Louisiana, really quickly, thousands of ballots have been distributed or even cast in 2 of your primaries that Governor Landry now says will be discarded. Is that not an election integrity concern?
Listen, the ultimate election integrity concern is to ensure that you don't have an election on an unconstitutional map. And when the highest court in the land says your map is unconstitutional, you cannot proceed. You can't have an election on an unconstitutional map. That's why not just Louisiana, but other states have reviewed their maps under this new ruling, the clarification of the court, to make sure that we do this right. So it's not our job that the legislature and the governor are figuring out how to handle all those mechanics, but ultimately the big question is, we're going to have a constitutional election. And when the Supreme Court declares such, you have to follow suit, and that's what's happening in Louisiana. Thank you.